to achieve. As a Black American who once struggled with credit, Dwayne knows firsthand the importance of credit education, especially in minority communities, and is committed to being an agent of change. The biggest threat to good credit is bad information. So we're excited to have him here today to debunk any myths that some of us might have about credit. And this is especially important for us as agents, as we are the guiding light for many of our clients on this home ownership journey. And so Dwayne's going to talk to us today about things that we can share with our clients, what they should know about credit, and also how to avoid those credit pitfalls. Because many of us have encountered even those who there's predatory practices in credit repair. So I would love to welcome Dwayne to our group. So yay, welcome, round of applause. How are you today?
Fantastic, because I choose to be. I want to apologize in advance for anybody who's tuning in case I start coughing. I don't know what's going on, but the devil is a liar, but Jesus is my throat lozenge. So we are definitely going to work through this. So, guys, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So I'm gonna just open it up to you. I know, I don't know if we're ready to prepare. You have a couple of slides prepared. See if we
Yeah.
can get those up for you. But I'm really gonna let you take it away. I did an introduction, but if there's anything I missed out, please let us know and take it from here.
Oh, no worries. Hey, guys, again, thank you for having me. I just want to jump into it, and I want to maximize the time that we have to talk about credit, to talk about the basic fundamentals of credit, because I don't want to assume that somebody knows something that we should go over. And then I want to leave enough room for questions. But when you look online or you look on TikTok or Instagram, I mean, you can't scroll two screens without seeing a credit repair ad for a company who's making promises that may seem too good to be true. So the first thing I want to do before we go further, I want to go into my why of how important credit is, what it means to me, and what got me here to where I'm at. So if you look on the screen, you see a red convertible. And this is back in the day. Let's call this 2005, 2006. And that car was pretty awesome on the outside. Kind of like some of our friends and family and people we know on social media. They're awesome on the outside. But we know that there's a different picture on the inside. And what I knew about this car was that the outside looked good, but the inside was another story. The only thing that worked on that bad boy was the check engine light. And when I went to the dealership to trade it in, the finance manager told me that he couldn't get me finance for a Snickers if I had a Twix as collateral. He said that I had some of the worst credit he ever saw. So because I looked good on the outside, I continued to drive. Okay. What was essentially a coffin on wheels. More on that in a second. Now, I decided to pull my credit report at that time to just see what this guy was talking about because it couldn't be that bad. And unfortunately, it was that bad. What you're looking at on the screen, if Monique could zoom in a little bit, you will see a picture of my credit score, and that is a FICO score, and it is at a 524. So next slide, please. What I continued doing was driving the car until that coffin on wheels caught on fire. Now, thank goodness, like a lot of people with bad credit, I was living at home with my parents, and that is the city's fire department coming to put my baby out. Okay, next slide, please. You can see the firefighters just pouring water into my car just for good measure, just to make sure that thing wouldn't start up ever again, right? And at that time, a song that they were playing on the radio was No Scrubs by TLC. And if you remember the lyrics to that, you're talking about on the best friend's on the best friend's side of on the passenger's side of the best friend's ride, right? I was the best friend with the car, but this is before Uber or Lyft or anything like that. So when they took my baby out, I was walking everywhere. Now, if somebody could guess what I did for a living, you'd be surprised to know that I was, of all jobs, a debt collector for one of the largest third-party collection agencies in the country. So ironically, with this jacked up credit, my occupation was to call people with bad credit and make them feel guilty about what they had going on in their life, bully them into pain, and make them feel bad about their financial situation when honestly, the typical person that I called had a higher credit score than I did. So that really didn't feel good to be me in my situation with what I did for a living. So I started working on my credit. And if we go to the next slide, I started again at that 524 credit score. Now, credit is a snapshot at the time you take it. It might be a 524 on Monday, might be a 499 on Tuesday. It does have slight fluctuations. I caught this on a good day at the 524, and I started working on my credit in April of 2009. By September 17th, I was at a 710 FICO score. And you'll see that on the next slide. Okay. And then 4 days after that on the next slide, you'll see that I am at a 764 FICO score. And that is me working on my own credit using the knowledge that I had accumulated as a debt collector in my profession. Now, again, this entire summer, I don't have a vehicle. I don't have a way to get to work. I'm spending half of my check getting to work through taxis and catching rides. At this point, I was able to go to a dealership with this credit score and restart my car shopping journey. And if you ever have financed a car, maybe you have used the A&P method like I have. And if you don't know, A&P stands for apply and pray. When you go into the dealership, you give them your name and your social, and you thank God when it come back with that 25% interest rate. Well, this time it was a little bit different. I went to my bank first because I was empowered by my score and I was able to get a check. And with that check, I was told that I could get anything I wanted that was up to that dollar amount of that check. And next slide, please. I was able to get my dream car. So I think it was ridiculous that the highest credit score I ever had up until then was a 600, and that's only if I added all three of them together. And it's also ridiculous that now my autograph is worth money, and I can go into a dealership, sign my name, and get anything I wanted. And at that point, I looked in the mirror and I asked myself, well, damn, Dwayne, which side of ridiculous do you want to be on? And it was an obvious choice for me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take people with me. So when I talk to somebody about their credit and when my team talks to somebody about their credit, we're not asking them, we're not selling them, we're grabbing them and we're saying, come with us if you want to live. Because the last time I checked, you can't live in America with bad credit. It is going to be the glass ceiling on everybody's dream, black, white, man or woman, but we're here to talk about Black folks today. We're going to talk about some of the poor habits that we have because we are empowered by our potential to change those poor habits. I'll tell you what, when I had that bad credit and people were calling me, debt collectors calling the debt collector for money that was owed, you know what I tell them? I would say, hey, I don't have it right now. Hey, my dog died. I ain't even have a dog. Hey, this is going on, that is going on. But you know what was going on? Can you take the slides off and come to me? This is what was going on right here. This is what was going on right here. This is an Air Jordan 4 from 1999. And I have never actually worn this shoe. It's only fallen apart because it was dry. It's been dry rotting in the box for the past 25 years. So when I was telling debt collectors that I did not have the money to pay bills, I was buying Air Jordans. Now, why in the world do I have a pair of Air Jordans that I never even tried on my foot? Because I would buy two pairs in the same colors. If somebody stepped on the first pair, I had a backup pair in the box, right? And again, like a lot of people we see on social media, it looked good on the outside, but the inside was rotten. And if you wait long enough, that inside rotting becomes the outside. Guys, we've got to take pride in our own name. We can't be buying jerseys with Travis Kelce's name on the back. We've got to lift up our own name. I was too busy chasing Michael Jordan, but when I finally stopped and realized I could make my own autograph worth something, I never went back. And if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the last pair of Air Jordans I ever bought. Look at this thing. It's falling apart. And we can see it falling apart now, but you know what's been happening? It's been falling apart the whole time. And some of us are living lives in a way where we're falling apart and we're trying to keep this facade and we're not going to do anything about it until it's too late. So hopefully, if somebody takes anything from what we go over tonight, is that you have the power to reach people, starting with the person in the mirror, and you have the power to be an example to other people that can see the change in you and know they can make that change in them. So are there any questions so far before we keep going? All right, cool.
No questions as of yet in the chat, but feel free if you have any questions to go ahead and post something.
So my journey has taught me that, in my opinion, credit is the most important thing in life. Now, that's a hot take, and I've had people disagree with me. And typically when they do, they'll say, well, my children are more important than credit. My family is more important than credit. My spouse or my loved ones, my parents are more important than credit. And I say, okay, cool. I want you to go to the bank and I want you to put down good mama's collateral. And I want to see how far you get through that underwriting process. Because if you think that there's something that's more important than credit, I'm willing to bet you need credit to take care of that someone or something. It's just the way our country is set up, our financial system. I'm talking to a group of Black EXP realtors, okay? I can't think of a more ambitious group to be speaking to, okay? Because if you didn't have that ambition, you probably wouldn't be in the industry right now. Anybody that's listening to this right now is built to be a realtor, built to be an agent, built to be in the real estate industry. So you have to have ambition if that's you. And the thing about ambition is that it's going to cause you to want something that is slightly out of your reach. And that gap between your reach and what you desire is going to be credit. It's going to be the ability to use someone else's resources or money or financing and be able to take that, close your gap, and make money faster than you have to pay it back. So we want to make sure that score stays high to give us the options to live our best available life to us. Now, if we're talking about systemic racism, I am sure that everybody listening to this, myself included, has either experienced racism to some degree, and if you've been blessed enough to not, then you probably know somebody who has, right? And when you think about systemic racism, I picture people trying to get a fair shot, but not given a path as to how. Asking for a clear way to get to where they want to be, but having it being muddy and unclear, okay? So when something is systemic in an oppressive nature, it's usually going to be shadows attached to it. It's going to be legalese. It's going to be language that we can't understand. And the one thing about a credit score is that it is an objective 3-digit number that's factored based on your payment history and other criteria, and it's equal to everybody. So when somebody tries to play some Black folks and say that they can't get a mortgage, when these white folks or another race with a lower score who are less qualified got that same product, when you pull those credit scores out, somebody's got to give an explanation. Somebody's got to give an explanation when the Jones family has a 700 household FICO score and the Jacobson family has a 650 and they're closing on a home, but the Jones is still stuck renting. Somebody has to give an explanation. This is one of the few calling cards where we can demand respect or demand somebody explain why they are treating us the way they are, or why we can't get something that we have earned and are qualified for, okay? Credit shines a light on these things that could be holding us back. So we really need to get to a point where we're taking care of our credit. We need to be educated on it, and we need to be able to leverage it, because credit can make a wonderful slave, but it can make an awful master. So I want to go over some credit fundamentals just to make sure we're on the same page so we know how to master it. So if we could go to the slide with the credit fundamentals and basics. All right, awesome. Is there a way to zoom that in so we can kind of see the text on it? Or maybe that's just the way it looks on my phone. As long as everybody can see it, we're good to go. All right, give me 1 second, please. So the first thing that we want to talk about, if we go to the table of contents on the next slide, let's talk about what is credit, okay? And we can keep going with the slides. Credit, by definition, it's the ability to borrow money or access goods or services with the understanding you'll pay later. In the real world, it is absolutely your reputation. It is one of the most important things in life. You cannot make enough money to eliminate the need for credit. That is very important. Sometimes when we're talking to some of our community members that are longshoremen, or they have a cash type job, they think that they can save their way to get what they want. But again, what happens, that ambition kicks in. You're going to want something out of your reach. And when you don't have a credit history established, you're going to have that door slammed in your face. You need to know how to manage credit. I'll make sure you will before the end of this hour. Okay. Now, what is it used for on the next slide? It tells us that there are really only two events credit should be used for, and that is opportunities and emergencies. Those are really the only two things that credit should be used for. And honestly, we hope that you're in a situation where your credit is primarily being leveraged for opportunity, but we're going to talk about how to prepare for emergency situations and have your credit as a buffer if necessary. Now, the basics of credit. Now, let's talk about this. This is very important. Understand that there are 3 credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Each of them provides a score, which is going to be a numerical grade as to how credit worthy you are. Okay. Now, some people get this wrong. How many credit scores do you have? Would anybody like to guess? Would the moderator like to guess how many credit scores you have?
Yes, it depends. There are a couple. There's 3 different reporting agencies, but I know there's all different kinds of FICOs. There's Vanguards. I don't know the number though.
Well, you know what? I love what you said. You said there's all different kinds of FICOs, and that is more than a lot of people realize. There are actually 43 different FICO scores. Okay, and if you want to include Vantage scores, then you have even more. We certainly want to focus on the FICO scores. And the first credit point that I want to make is that when one of our EXP community members, sends you to a lender, or if the lender comes back and says, hey, the FICO score is a 590, we need them at a 620 or a 640. And your lead is like, no, well, I just looked at my FICO score and I'm at a 690. The lender doesn't know what they're talking about. I have seen situations where a realtor gets upset with the lender in that regard. And the disconnect is that the lender's looking at a mortgage FICO score, and the lead who swears they're at a 700 or a 680, they absolutely are, but they are typically looking at a different FICO model score. So definitely trust your lender. There's 43 of them. Your lender, when they refer to that middle score, they're talking about the ones that refer to mortgage. I've just seen that a lot. And just trust your lender when it comes to those scores. Okay.
There's a question in the chat. What's the reason for so many different scores? Like, why are they 40?
That's a great question. The reason they have so many different scores is because you have different loan products and people are complex. That's the best answer I could give. You know, we have people who will pay their mortgage bills and utilities on time, but they let those credit cards go, right? Or they'll pay their credit cards on time and they won't pay their car note on time. And I know back in the day when I was tripping with bad credit, I know I would pay my car note on time and before I took care of anything else, because I can't drive my house to the beach to show it off. So that was just my mentality then. So I would pay my car note then. So where am I going with this? If you're at the dealership and you're applying for an auto loan, that lender is going to be more concerned about how you handle car payments than any other payments. So if you went to the car dealership and they pulled your Equifax, they're looking at an auto score. You go to the mall and you go to Macy's and you apply for a card, they're looking at your credit card Equifax. And when you go to get a mortgage, they're looking at your mortgage FICO score on Equifax. So you could have multiple people pull the same Equifax report and you could have 3 different scores, right? So yeah, different scores for different products, right? So let's talk about the actual parts that make up all these different scores. So with the FICO score, you have 5 different major parts, okay? The number one part is going to be payment history, okay? That is 35% of your FICO score. Now, I don't want to age myself, but I want to give you this example, okay? When I was in school, if I got 35% of a test wrong, I automatically had a D. Automatically. So think about it like this. If your amounts owed were perfect, new credit perfect, length of credit history perfect, credit mix perfect, but your payment history is off, then the most you could get on your credit report card is a D, right? Let that sink in. And also, let's talk about this. Lenders have overlays, and one late payment can be so detrimental to your credit. My credit scores typically hover between 780 and 820. If I were to be late on one payment, just oops, I forgot, I could lose as much as 160 points off of my average FICO score. Just one. If one late payment slips through the cracks, most lenders aren't going to be able to touch me for at least 12 months. Okay, so these things matter. It takes time to build credit. It takes a second to destroy it. Okay, yeah. So payment history is 35%. Okay, the next most valuable column is going to be amounts owed, right? So that's going to be 30% of your credit. So again, if the rest of your credit was managed perfectly, but your amounts owed category was off, the highest you could score on your credit report card is a 70, which is going to be a D, right? Okay, so new credit is going to be 10%. Now, credit mix is also 10%. Now, what is new credit? New credit is going to be looking at your inquiries, right? You hear people say, oh, is it going to be a hard pull or a soft pull? New credit is basically the sum total of your inquiries, right? And then also actually getting a new account, okay? Credit mix is going to be 10%. FICO likes to see how you handle different types of accounts. Yeah, it's cool if you got a store card, or it's great if you got an auto loan, but they're going to put more faith in somebody that can manage an auto loan, a credit card, and a mortgage. That's somebody who's on top of their bills. We feel more comfortable giving them a higher credit score and better loan opportunities than somebody who's managing one account. Okay. Length of credit history, pretty straightforward, 15%. So length of credit history, they have a formula to average out all of your credit accounts, okay? And then they factor in the single oldest account. This is why people tell you never close a credit card, right? And absolutely get a credit card. Guys, listen, if y'all's Black families are like my Black families, then you got a grandmother in there somewhere telling you the credit card is Satan's plastic. Okay, grandma means well, but guys, you need to get a credit card as quickly as possible. All of these categories are basically geared towards how you manage credit cards. In other words, revolving debt. Nobody really cares how you manage an installment loan. I mean, if you screw that up, I mean, they're looking at it like, okay, this car payment is $500. You're going to pay it on the 5th of every month, and you're going to do that for 5 years. I mean, it's kind of hard to screw that up, right? I mean, either you do it or you don't. But when we give you a store card, there's a little more temptation. You run up into Nordstrom's with a credit line. Some of us folks, especially us black ones, wanting to rock them labels, we don't know what to do. So if we can manage that properly, then that gives people a little more faith. But the big one is a major credit card. Because Lord have mercy, you could use that thing at Nordstrom's, but you can use it at Macy's, Bloomingdale's, any store in the mall. Heck, you could go to an ATM and take cash off that thing. You could go into the club and drop it like it's hot. So they really want to see how you handle the temptation with a major credit card. And the sooner you get one, the better off you will be in the long run. But let's talk about how, looking at this chart, let's talk about how people can take a simple action that they don't think is a big deal and how it affects them, right? Okay, so let's say you're in Kohl's, right? And the girl is so nice to you at the register. She's, hi, how are you doing today? Oh, that's a nice brooch you have on, right? And they just make you feel so good about yourself. And they say, why don't you apply for credit today? We'll give you 10% off of that purchase, right? And you do it. First of all, don't do it. You're literally buying a $20 pack of socks. I'll give you 10% of that purchase not to apply, okay? But let's talk about what it looks like if you do. That single application at Kohl's, right? Okay, so you're going to apply for it. It's going to be a hard inquiry. That's going to ding you right there on the 10% new credit, right? Now, you're already dinged whether you get the card or not, right? Okay, but then, oh my goodness, you get approved for the card. So guess what that's going to affect? That's also going to ding new credit again. So now you're double dinged on new credit. You're dinged on length of credit history because when you get a new account, the average age of your accounts goes down. So you ding new credit twice. You ding length of credit history if you get approved. You've offset your credit mix because if you have one credit card, one mortgage, and one auto loan, now you've thrown that ratio off. Okay. Now and then you go ahead and put that purchase on the credit card, right? And then you go home to Kohl's.com and make some more purchases. Now you've affected the amounts owed. So off one credit inquiry, you have affected 65% of your credit score. And that's why inquiries are so dangerous. Yes, you should not get a hard inquiry because you shouldn't get a hard inquiry. But if you could imagine, a glacier or a body of ice in the water, how you can see the top of it and there's all that underneath the water, that's what it's like when you apply for a credit card without planning. There's a whole lot of consequence that you don't think about till after it hits you, right? So next slide, please.
Quick question on that, because I just want to touch. I think it's so important as you talk about this credit mix because many of us don't even understand. Bad credit is one thing, but building credit is another. And from what I understand about credit, it's time, right? So you have to start at some point. But when you talk about length of credit history and opening up new cards, I guess this is something I never realized before. It's an average when they look of length of credit history. Are they typically looking at kind of the average of your different credit accounts? Or are they looking at, oh, you have a long period on one card versus if you have one card you've had for 20 years and then you start opening like 5 more recent cards, that's going to have a pretty significant impact on your credit, as I understand it.
So excuse me, that's a really great question. And oh man, that's a really good question. I'm so glad you asked that. If they look at your credit report as a whole and they average it out, right? Although if you've got a 20-year account in there, that's fantastic. If you've got, grandma or uncle that can put you on a card that's got that great payment history and it's been there forever, bake them a pie or go cut the grass or whatever you need to do to get them to put you on the card. You don't even need a card. You just want that payment history reporting on there. Now, on the flip side, if you don't have uncle or grandmom, you might be tempted to buy a trade line, which is something that we see online, and that's something that you want to avoid like a plague. Um,
Yeah.
these credit card companies have massive amounts of algorithms, and they know when you're faking a funk. They can tell how many people have been moved on and off, of a credit card, and you don't want to get caught up in, buying trade lines or things of that nature. But just back to your question, they look at all accounts, right? And this is why it's so important to be strategic with how you open your credit, because you do need to open credit, but you also want to be diligent about making sure you don't close any accounts. I've seen people get frustrated with, I don't know, let's just say Bank of America's Visa card, and you call in and you just get pissed off at customer service. So you say, you know what? I'm going to close the card. I'll show you. You're not showing customer service nothing. What you're doing is dinging your own future and shooting yourself in the foot. You never want to close a credit card. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, but you typically never want to close a card. Now, once I get people to really understand that they shouldn't close a card, then what happens is that it sneaks in through the back door because their card will get closed for inactivity, right? So the other way to protect the length of your credit history is to make sure you use your cards periodically at least 4 times a year. I use my cards once every quarter, right? And if you are getting emails or letters in the mail saying, hey, girl, we're here. Here's 10% off to use your card today. Or, hey, just a reminder that, hey, we've got items on sale. That's their friendly way of saying, yo, if you don't use this card, we're going to shut this thing down. Right. So don't take that for granted. Make sure you're using your card. I recommend once every 3 months. You've got to protect it. You can't let something get closed on accident. It will affect your credit score. And unfortunately, it'll happen at the worst possible time. Because a lot of us aren't looking for credit until we need to use it. Right.
I
So
have definitely experienced that. So definitely pay attention to that card management. Had a card with a significant limit on it, and I just didn't use it because I didn't need it. And they took it from me. They're like,
right.
"We're not gonna use it. We're just gonna close it. Okay, bye."
Hey, guys, and don't let something else come in the back door, right? I mean, look, just because I said you got to use the card every 3 months, that don't mean you got to go ham up in the store, right? I mean, you could go into Macy's and get some bubble gum at the counter or a pair of socks. You know it's going to be about, or Nordstrom's. You know it's going to be about $30 for a pair of socks. You know, so you could do that. You don't have to go replace a wardrobe or buy something, fancy. Just do enough to keep the card open. All
Yeah,
right.
or maybe a good practice is to put a utility um, on that card and have it paid off. Like, how do you, as far as like when you're charging something to a card, um, does it have to be paid in full? Do you recommend leaving a balance? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that depends on where you're at in life. I think that if you're just managing your credit from a day-to-day basis in your regular life, I think you just pay everything off. So you don't let a molehill turn into a mountain. Now, that being said, if you're prepping for a application for credit, then you'd want to leave at least a small balance on a card. If we were to look at the average person with an 800 FICO score, they typically have, if they have a balance, it's going to be approximately 7%. So if you want the perfect ratio, you would have a balance of $7 for every 100 that you have in a limit. So if you got $1,000 limit, you'd be looking at a $70 balance in credit. And that would be the perfect ratio. Why not emulate people that in an 800 score, right? Now, that's going to be counter advice to what we see out there that says, hey, Are you below 30%? Now that's great advice for a college student. That's great advice for some of us that may have not launched yet. We're 27, we're still at the crib. Nothing wrong with that. But when you are trying to get something, it's like throwing darts. You want to get close to the bullseye as possible, and that's going to be 7%. I can tell you from research and experience that a credit utilization of 10% will affect your FICO score, right? And some of these things don't make sense. They're counterintuitive, but you say, well, why 7%? Why not pay it off? If you don't have a balance, you're not showing the system that you can leverage credit, and it's as bad as not having credit. So your score would actually drop if you paid your card down to zero. So if you've got zero balances on all your cards and you're looking at like a 760 FICO score, that score could be 10, 15, 20 points higher if you had a small balance. So 7% is the magic number, not 30. That's that generic TikTok advice. You need to let yourself know and your people know that 7% is the magic number for utilization.
Good stuff.
So yes. So just looking at what makes up a FICO score, don't get it twisted. Exceptional credit, 800. Very good is 740 to 799. Good credit starts at a 670 credit score. 670. Not so keep that in mind. Most lenders are like, hey, we can get you in the house 580, 620, 640. You don't actually need good credit to get a house. Good credit literally starts at a 670 credit score. Fair is going to be 580 to 669. Poor is anything 580 and below. Now, again, I feel like I'm talking to an accelerated group. I feel like I'm talking to ambitious people. Let me give you financial chocolates definition of what a good credit score is. Okay. I feel like a good credit score is the one that gets you what you want. I don't care if FICO tells me, I don't care if FICO tells me good credit starts at a 670 or a 680. If I'm trying to refinance and the lender tells me I need a 740 for the best rate and I got a 700, that ain't good enough for my goals. Your credit is your ways, it's your navigation system to get from where you're at to where you want to be. So good credit is defined by what you need your credit to get. If you need a 750 to get the lowest rate for your situation and you got a 720, I don't care if somebody else says it's good, it ain't good enough, right? So one thing we're going to leave with is the ambition to keep our credit as high as possible, right? Okay, so I've got some other things that I want to share with you that I want to cover real quick. So let's zoom through these best practices on the next slide. Check your credit every chance you get. And if you want to do it the free way, I'll use an app like Credit Karma because that's going to show you Equifax and TransUnion. And then Experian has a free app between the two apps. You see all three bureaus. You are not looking at that score on Credit Karma. You are not looking at that score at all. That's not even a FICO score. But what you are looking at is what's on the credit report. If it says you have 5 accounts, then you trust that you have 5 accounts, right? Now, best practices. Don't go 30 days late on a credit bill, right? Do not go 30 days late, okay? This is the most commonly misconstrued thing about credit. Okay, it reports in 30-day intervals. For example, if you were 29 days late on every single bill every month, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to piss some people off, namely your creditors. They're going to be calling you, emailing you, DMing you, texting you, charging you late fees. But you know what? No one else is going to know you're late but them because it does not hit your credit until 30 days. And I want to emphasize this point because I've seen people, we get frustrated. Your closing date gets moved. You're waiting on the check. You already know you're late and you give up. You're 19 days late. Okay, your minimum payment is $45, $300, whatever it is. Get that payment in by the 29th day. And people, if you're on the 29th day, you can't mail it in. You got to make that payment that day so it counts that day, right? So biggest thing that I would see people save their credit with, understand that you could be 29 days late but not 30 days late. So let's talk about something else that plagues our communities. Let's talk about payday loans and how a $200 payday loan can turn into this avalanche of debt. Well, think about this. If you really needed a payday loan, think about this. You really need a payday loan. Now, I'm not encouraging you to be late on something, but your biggest bill is typically going to be your mortgage payment. Let's just say your mortgage payment is $1,800. What I would do if my choices were payday loan, title loan, or something else, I'm going to go with something else, and I'm going to intentionally be late on my mortgage payment, or I'm going to intentionally be late on my auto loan payment. I'm going to look at the calendar, know when the 29th day is, and I'm going to give myself a loan to that 29th day by withholding the payment. The worst hit I'm going to take is whatever the late fee is. Maybe that's $40 or $50. You're better off taking that $40, $50 late fee and getting the payment in by the 29th day than you are going down that rabbit hole on a payday loan. So when we get educated about credit and we use credit as a light to shine on our options, we can get creative and we can save ourselves from penalties that the uneducated are suffering from. Right? So it's very important to understand that rule. Do not go 30 days late. Plan ahead, then apply. It's 2024. I can tell you exactly which cards I want to apply for February 2026 because I apply for credit cards in 2-year intervals, right? Okay. So that takes us to another rule, and I'm rapid firing. If somebody has a question, I can slow down and go back over it. A common question or a common misconception out there is don't apply for any credit you don't need. Oh man, don't do that. You don't want to take out all that debt. Don't apply for credit till something happens. Man, look, man, if your life is like mine, you get all these credit offers when you don't need it. And then when that emergency comes, ain't nobody trying to give you a loan or nothing. And if your life's like mine, emergencies love to show up to the party of my life unannounced, and they love the plus one, right? And now I'm in a jam where I can't get the credit that I need. So you need to apply for credit before you need it, which is why I apply for cards in 2-year intervals. Why 2 years? Because it takes about 24 months of payment history for an account to no longer count as new, right? So every 2 years, I apply for more credit. And the other question that I get commonly is how much credit do I need? Okay. If you don't leave with anything, leave with this. This is going to be different for everybody. And you ain't heard this from anywhere else. If you heard this from somewhere else, I want you to let me know who you heard it from in this chat because I'm going to need to check that person because they stole it from me. Okay. Here's the deal. How much credit do you need? I need you to take your worst crisis ever in your life. Maybe your house burned down. Maybe your car caught on fire. I can relate to that. Maybe your boyfriend broke up with you. I mean, whatever. Maybe your washing machine went out. Whatever your worst financial situation was, I want you to take that and put a dollar amount to it. And then I want you to multiply it times 4. And that's how much credit you need. And the logic behind that is if lightning struck twice and you had the worst luck happen in your life again, and you had to use credit to take care of it, you would be at a 25% utilization, which is under that 30% rule that we talked about, which also leaves room for you to handle any other emergencies or opportunities. We want to avoid being maxed out. And if you take your financial worst case scenario, let's say you had to replace all your windows or your HVAC and it came up to $10,000. You need $40,000 in credit. Now, who in the world is going to give you a $40,000 line of credit? Okay, to quote the great Keith Sweat, nobody is going to give you a 40,000 line of credit, which is why you want to apply for multiple cards every 2 years. Do you see how all this advice full circles and goes back and connects to each other? That's because I put my own life over the coals through my ignorance over the years and found out all this stuff the hard way. So I was the hard testimony, so you could benefit from this, right? So Any questions on anything I went over so far?
Yeah, we actually do have a question in the chat. It says,
Yeah.
is it true that paying off an old collection can reset the clock on the 7 years for reporting?
Okay. Did the question say paying it off?
Yeah, is it true that paying off an old collection can reset the clock on the 7 years for reporting?
No, no. I mean, if you're paying it off, it wouldn't be any reason to report. So if we want to get technical, yes, an item stays on your credit for a negative item stays on your credit for 7 years, but the collection agency is really reporting another item, right? So let's say there's a credit card that went to collections. You'll typically see that credit card up there as a charge off, and then you'll see a collection for that charge off, right? The collection, you might get turned over to collection February 2024, but the original account is 5 years old. Well, it can only be on your credit for 2 more years, right? Because 7 years, it's going to be 7 years based off the original account. So no, paying it is not going to reset that statute. What you want to avoid is making a payment arrangement on it, right? I would not call a collection agency unless I had, if the collection agency is coming at me for $2,000, I'm not calling them unless I got $2,000. Now, that doesn't mean I'm trying to give them $2,000. I'm gonna try to negotiate. I'm gonna try to get it done for 500, 700, as low as I could get. But the thing is, you never know what you're going to get from a collection agency. If you call them fools early in the month, you're going to get a bunch of pushback. If you call them later in the month, they're going to be a little more flexible because you're trying to get their bonuses and commissions, right? So depending on who you call, how old the account is, different factors. We used to pull the account up in the computer and see how much supporting evidence we had. And if we didn't have a little bit, if we had a little bit, we were willing to work with you. So get your ducks in a row and then negotiate. The mistake I see is that people will call and inquire about something and not have their funds ready to pay. And now you basically woke up a sleeping dog, right? To give you a little more insight, when I was a debt collector, we spent most of our time trying to get somebody on the phone. And when we actually got somebody on the phone, they put that fax machine noise in our ear. They'd scream at us. They'd call us all kind. They called me out my name so many times. I'll tell you, I got PTSD from it, right? So I say all that to say this. It's unusual when somebody is calling in to make an arrangement. Our antennas go up, our eyes get big because we know you don't care about paying off your debt. You applying for something. So the first thing I'm gonna do is pull your credit report, look at them inquiries. Oh, my girl Rachel applying for mortgages. She done got a car. Let me look at these trade lines. That girl done got a $900 car note from BMW of whoever. She rolling. We ain't settling nothing. Somebody told her she has to pay this to get a house. We want all of our money. So you got to keep that in mind before you call these debt collectors, right? Yeah.
And I guess
That
also too, like an additional question to that, let's just say the original account was 10 years old. When you call it, like when you go to pay it off, does that close the account and then effectively close that length of the account, I guess that time, that account that you've had it? Could that affect your credit length, I guess?
Hey, before I answer this, can I just say that some of these questions are just giving me life over here? I mean, I'm really loving these questions.
Deep
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, these are great questions. Okay, so this is why it's important to never close a credit card. The reason why we say that is a credit card is a revolving account. You have two types of credit, revolving and installment. Okay, installment is going to be like a mortgage or an auto loan. Those things are going to close automatically when you make your last payment. Nothing you can really do about that, right? When it closes, it is going to affect your credit, but you will still have the payment history up there for 10 years. Good accounts stay on your credit for 10 years. So basically, you start that 10-year clock when you pay off something. That's why a lot of times we'll see a 55, 60-year-old longshoreman and we'll be like, hey, look, you don't have any credit at all. Well, wait, I financed I've bought 7, 8, 9 cars my entire life. Yeah, you did, but when you made that last payment, that 10-year clock started, and all that payment history disappeared, right? Because it's a closed-end account. This is the importance of having credit cards, right? So your credit card is open-ended; it'll stay as long as you show activity on it. So anyway, I say all that to say this. Yes, when you make that last payment on an auto loan, a mortgage, a personal loan, something that's an installment, yes, the account's going to close off. You probably will not lose any points. If you do lose some points, it's going to be usually a small amount, nothing to be concerned about, right? But that 10-year clock will start. I think the biggest misconception is that people, when they make the last car payment, they expect for their credit score to go up through the roof, right? And they're disappointed when their 650 is like a 649 after they've made that last car payment. So
Yeah,
yeah.
all those years you paid it off. That's just so that's worth something, right?
Yeah. All those years you put into it and what you got to show for it. Sound like a relationship out of Tyler Perry movie. Nothing, right? So,
Does the same hold true for a negative account, like a collections account? Let's just say you've had that account in collections for you've had the account 10 years, it's been in collections the last two, you decide you're going to negotiate and pay it off, it closes out the account.
mhm.
What does that do to your score?
Well, so let's talk about this. If you got something in collections, it shouldn't be older than 7 years because we're going to start looking at 7 years after the date of first delinquency, right? So that first payment, right? So if you're late January 2000, 17, then January 2024, it should be falling off the credit report by then. When you take care of the collection, the original account may still be there under trade lines. That still might take 7 years to fall off fully, even though you take the collection off, right? And what I would honestly look at is how close I am to the 7 years. Typically, if we get somebody in our program, they're they don't have all the money in the world in most cases, and we want to strategize where they're spending it at. And if something is over 6 years old or it's getting to that point, we probably direct their funds to another issue like card balances. So if you're close to the 7 years, depending on what you got going on, I might wait the 7 years for it to fall off, right? And hopefully that's a helpful answer.
Yes, it is. So
Yeah.
we have about 7 minutes left. Is there more presentation for you to go through, or
Uh,
we're
but
close to Q&A right now? Okay,
Yeah,
yep.
here's what I like to say really quickly. I mean, sometimes with credit, when you send people to us and they're entering our program, we're really unlicensed therapists pretending to be credit experts, right?
Just like real estate agents.
And everything on the credit report has an emotional story behind it. And what we start seeing is patterns of mentalities, right? So a couple of things that I want to go over of patterns that I think could improve folks' credit, right? One thing that we do in our community sometimes, we value services over products, right? So, we want to negotiate services. You'll see those posts. Some of us are guilty of them. Hey, I want a home inspector that's cheap and fast and available now. Well, I mean, that's probably going to affect the type of quality that you get in a home inspector, for instance. Or, when you want somebody to come over, cut your grass, do something like that, provide a service. We see realtors get discounted all the time. People, act like they want a FISBO, like, there's no value to what they provide, and then they find out the hard way, right? Negotiate on products. Buy a service based on the value you place on yourself, right? And that will change your life, right? Taking pride in your last name and not Michael Jordan's last name. Now, I love me some Mike. I still do, but I had to start putting myself first. And when I put Mike's name first, I could barely afford the Jordans. I started putting my name first. I could buy all the Jordans I want. Isn't it amazing how that works, right? The other thing that I want to mention is the importance of keeping our money in our community, right? So, what does that mean? I've seen people manage, their credit card accounts and bills that show up on their credit report on time, and then they just do their family member dirty over a $50, loan so they get paid, right? So why don't we flip that, right? The first bank that you ever had an account at is the bank of your last name. And I don't know why more people don't do what I am about to suggest, but if I was coming up and I still do this, I would turn all my family members into financial institutions, right? And here's what I would do. I would go to that rich uncle or my cousin that's got it, and I would ask him to borrow $500. Here's the kicker. I don't need $500. I'm just going to ask him, can I borrow it, right? Remember, ask for credit when you don't need it. Borrow $500, tell them you need 60 days to pay it back, give it to them in 30 days and give them $600. And I guarantee when you actually get into the jam, you have got good credit with that cousin, uncle, family member. But do we do that? No. Typically, we'll borrow $500 when we're in the jam, and then they never see that money again, right? So why don't we start taking care of our family, keeping our money in our community, paying interest to our people, and having all these off-the-credit lenders that can take care of us when we see an opportunity or an emergency, right? But those are pretty much the points that I wanted to cover. Let's open up for questions.
All right. Any general questions in the audience right now? I think we got kind of a quiet bunch today. Okay. I was just asking all the good questions, right?
Dwayne, I have a question. It's Monique.
Hey, Monique.
If somebody has no credit score, not because it's not bad because they did something wrong, they just never established credit, and let's say they're not in a position where they're actively seeking to get a house or car, they're not actively looking to use the credit at this time, what is your recommendation for them to just kind of get started and to build? What activities should they be involved in?
I would love for them to get 2 to 3 credit cards right away. If they have no credit at all, depending on what they do, they may need to get secured cards. There is a company called Open Sky. Their website address is Open Sky CC. That's a place where you can open up a credit card with a $200 deposit. Your limit will be set by that deposit. The most beautiful thing about it is that it does not use your credit to determine approval. So basically, if you have the $200 and you never messed up with them before, you're guaranteed approval, right? So Open Sky. I love Discover's secured card. I also love being established with a bank and a credit union and going to them to try to get a personal loan or a credit card, even if it's secured. So I would be establishing accounts with urgency, right? Because remember, what is credit for? It's for opportunities and it's for emergencies. And we never know when those two things are going to happen, right? So just because they don't want to use credit now, they want to be prepared for opportunities and emergencies. They need to start with some secure cards.
Thanks. I have another question.
Yes.
So I hear people talk about, on the internet, I hear them talk about this self card that's like a savings, but it's like a credit card. How does that work for people?
So I see mixed results with that product. Now, Self, they have several different products, and they're coming out with products all the time. One product that I've seen on credit reports is a card that reports a balance and does not report a limit. So when you think about that, what that looks like, let's say you have a $100 balance, but the limit is 0. Well, we know a $100 balance on a $100 limit would be maxed out, right? So a $100 balance on 0 is even worse. You can't even calculate that. So I've seen it mess people up more than it does people good. And honestly, my question for all of these debit cards that are supposed to help your credit and rent reporting and having your utilities show up on your credit report, why are you not just getting a real store card or a real personal loan or a real credit card from a bank, even if it's secured? A lender can tell that that's damn Netflix on your credit, bro. Netflix don't loan people money. Like, let's stop, let's stop faking the funk. Let's stop propping ourselves up and use real opportunities to build ourselves. So, that is the technical answer for why self is bad. They will report a balance is not a limit on a card. But the bigger question is, why are you not establishing traditional accounts that are the truth for what you're trying to do?
And so we are at 7 o'clock mark, but one quick question for you before we head on out. We as real estate agents, we come across clients all the time that have credit challenges or they're trying to prepare on the home ownership journey. I want to know more. What ways can you work with? Like, can we connect you with our clients? And what is the best way for us to do that?
Absolutely. It's fun times here at Credit Quando. We work in 48 states. The only states that we don't work in are going to be Georgia and South Carolina. When we take customers outside of Virginia, which we're happy to do, there are a lot of laws we follow. And we will typically be on a Zoom meeting with your clients out of state, which is great because it allows us to connect as we're connecting now. It builds trust through seeing our face and seeing one another with facial expressions. But there are a lot of laws, and some of them prevent us from actually being able to use a phone to contact people. So just understand that out of 48 states, you can send us leads, and we'll hop on a Zoom just like this. And they can see my smiling face with the ring light and everything, and we'll answer their credit questions and get them to the finish line. Do everything I can. What we'd be happy to do, we're moving into a new system that will allow you to log in, send leads without speaking to anybody and get updated on them. I'll personally walk people through this system and get you onboarded into it. And we could do that this month if you'd like to do that. In the meanwhile, if you could email any questions you have or any leads to team@ckdus.com. Again, that is team@ckdus.com. And I'm going to spell it out with my radio voice, TEAM@ckdus.com. And Monique Harps just put in chat for everybody. God bless you, Monique.
I'm on mute. So we really, really, really appreciate having you with us today. Such really good information, being able to help us guide our clients and just information for ourselves. So thank you again, and looking forward to maintaining, our relationship and sending something your way.
All right, cool. I'm in the group, guys. I'm part of the family. If you need anything, just let me know.
All right. All right, everyone. We really appreciate you for being here with us tonight for our monthly trainings. Next month, we have our very own Makita Smith, who's going to be here to tell us about how to become a international agent. So we're very, very, very excited about that. And stay tuned. See you next month on the second Tuesday